Healing from trauma requires some persistence. Okay, so here are the 10 things. Number 1, learn what complex PTSD is, not just what you've heard on the internet, not just what other people say about it, and not focusing all your energy on what might be the diagnosis of other people who are in your story. That's not the same thing as understanding what's going on with your brain and learning about your brain and about brain dysregulation and what that does to you, and about emotional dysregulation and re-regulation and what a difference that can make. How does that impact your life? We didn't know until very recently that CPTSD is an injury to your brain and nervous system. And a lot of therapists and clinical professionals still don't know this. It's really important that you educate yourself so that you can choose professional help well based on people who get it, and so that you can make decisions on your healing that's, based on current knowledge and not old ideas. Number 2, when you look at yourself and how you're doing with your healing process, be willing to notice some of the problems that maybe have nothing to do with trauma. Now, it's true, CPTSD can make it hard to focus. It can make it hard to be consistent, to be as kind and considerate as you want to be. And it might make it hard to stay present. CPTSD might almost certainly has damaged relationships in your life. It might have damaged your health as well. Okay, so all those things are trauma related, but everybody has a couple of problems that are just kind of ordinary human problems. So it could be something like, maybe you're often late. A lot of people struggle with that. You don't have to be traumatized to be somebody who's chronically late. Trauma could be implicated, but sometimes that's one of the things that you just have, It's just something you're doing right now. And the reason I love the problems that are just normal person problems is because they're a little easier to solve. You don't have to heal your brain necessarily to get that going. It could be that you need to keep your kitchen cleaner, that the whole kitchen smells like garbage all the time, and when people come over, you're ashamed. And I know how trauma can drive that kind of procrastination, but it's a solvable problem. And I love low-hanging fruit problems, things that you can solve quickly and get another little win. A little win, you start feeling confident that you can take on another project for healing. Okay. Number 3, prepare to move your stories about the abuse and neglect that happened to you out of present time looping thoughts and into what I call the memory bucket. If you can imagine, there's a bucket, there's your present time thinking, and there is a memory bucket. So there's everything going on in your mind now. CPTSD can trap your emotional and body reactions from old traumatic experiences and then keep them looping in your mind as if they're happening right now. That's why it's so hard to have CPTSD. It's a different thing than a memory. It's activating all your adrenaline, your cortisol, it speeds your heart rate, it scatters your thoughts and puts your whole body in a state of stress. So it makes it really hard to stop thinking about it or reacting to it. That's what I call looping, or I call it an electric thought. It's very charged. What you want is to have access to your thoughts and memories, but not to be controlled by them, not to, get physiologically changed every time they pop into your awareness. An ordinary memory has the trauma element deactivated. It's not electric. It's unplugged. You can remember it, and if anybody asks you a question about it, you can remember all the same details about it, but it doesn't trigger this huge physiological and neurological response in you. If you had trauma, you probably have some looping electric thoughts that give you very charged reactions, and you probably have some memories that are not charged. So when I say get ready, one thing that will help you is to become open to the idea that you don't always have to be reactive toward the past. I teach a method to calm reactions. There are others out there. My method is called the daily practice. And if you watch this channel, you hear me talk about it like a lot. And I point you toward the description section under every video. That's where you can find it. It's a free course. It takes less than an hour to learn it and try it. And you can give it a try and see if, like me, it helps you take those looping thoughts and just kind of calm them down. Sometimes naming those stress thoughts and releasing them really does make a difference. So, good thing to try. Now, I'm going to keep teaching you under the assumption that you've tried these techniques, but if you haven't, just try to hear the essence of what I'm saying here. If you feel anxious at the thought of surrendering your fear and resentment through these exercises, and some people do because fear and resentment, for a lot of us, it's a primitive form of a boundary. Like being anxious and worried or angry can feel like the only protection we've got. Like, no way, you're not getting in. if that's you, I would just say, do it a tiny bit at a time, do a little bit at a time and see what happens, and just see when you do surrender fear about something, do you end up incapacitated, or does it make you a doormat? Or does it make you feel like a little more lighter-hearted? If you're feeling more lighthearted, you're doing it right. It's not been my experience that facing what's bothering you and writing it down amplifies it or makes it worse. In fact, it makes me feel freer of it and more empowered. It makes me more clear about when something dangerous is in my presence and when I need to act on something. So you can try that. Just try that. You don't have to believe me. You try. Number 4 is stop trying to make other people not trigger you. All right. So if you get very triggered by people, and pretty much everyone with complex PTSD gets triggered by people, that's what makes connection hard for us, in fact. And that's what makes us have a tendency to want to isolate or keep people at arm's length, because those interactions can be so triggering. So there's a misunderstanding that if we could just get other people to stop behaving the way they do, or saying what they say, or making us feel the way we feel, then we would be okay. And sometimes, occasionally that's true, but it's usually not true. Because even if they wanted with all their hearts to stop triggering you, they probably wouldn't succeed. The trigger is in here. It's, somewhere in here. It's for you to work on. And anyway, most people are not willing to try to change everything for you. That's just reality. So you learning how to calm your triggers is going to be more effective, easier, and more empowering for you than trying to make the world around you change so that it doesn't trouble you. Now, when you can learn to calm your triggers, you become more perceptive, and you can begin to tell if someone in your presence is actually a difficult person, or if you're just feeling triggered and having difficulty, but they're not causing that difficulty. That's hard to tell sometimes, right? Surely you struggle. Sometimes I do. Is it just me? Is it them? Am I being crazy? Am I being a doormat? And in most cases, you're confused about that question because you have triggers. So learning to know the difference is called discernment. And discernment is one of the biggest things that we lose with CPTSD. The ability to tell the difference between, am I generating this drama, or is something actually being done to me? It's so difficult to go through life when you're not clear about that. That is a consequence for some of us of how we were raised, feeling really scared and upset and being like, I'm scared, there's all this fighting in the house, and go, no, there's nothing going on, shut up, go to bed, right? So you start second guessing yourself, and it turns into maybe a developmental delay, where you just have a little trouble like making sense of reality. So using the writing technique I'm telling you in the daily practice can be a really good way to start strengthening your discernment. You could also do that with a therapist. You could do that with friends. You could do that in a 12-step fellowship. It's really important, though, to have a way to face what's intense for you and to get some support while you figure out what is reality. There's no substitute for other people for that. And what a relief when you get a strong feeling that someone you meet doesn't belong in your life, or something they did was a deal breaker for you, versus when someone is a person you want in your life and you can see your triggers for what they are. You can work to make your relationship better. You can become more trustworthy. You can be a better friend to them by calming your triggers. What you open up for yourself with those calm triggers is choice. It's not going to make you like a perfectly nice person who puts up with anything. It's not going to make you mean. It just gives you choices about how you want to respond because you can perceive things better. So the other great thing about learning to calm your triggers is that you become flexible. You become able to hang out with a variety of different people, and you can be in all kinds of circumstances. You don't have to be so particular and have, so-called boundaries about, I don't do this, I don't let people say that. You can start to be flexible and just let people be themselves and let life happen around you. You are safe to relax around people when you know that when you need a boundary and you need to step back from someone, you can. And when you know your boundaries and you're prepared to honor them, you can be less afraid to connect with people and instead be more open to them. So all the bad things that come with CPTSD, problems with relationships, focusing, balancing your emotions, stress levels, all that gets less activated if you don't get triggered. So there's your superpower. If you were to do one thing, learn to notice when you're triggered and bring it down. Now, learning to notice dysregulation and a triggered state in yourself, that's a huge piece of what I teach in my coaching programs and my courses. Dysregulation triggers disconnection from people, and that in turn triggers self-defeating behavior. And when healing begins in those areas, good parts of you have room to come shining through. Your kindness, your competence, your talents, your joy, all of this has space to take root in your life and bear fruit. The good things in you, that's what gets suppressed by all the trauma. And it gets locked down when your reaction to hurt and trauma is to start to control the environment. Some people go through life suppressed, for years, but only because they were too dysregulated to manage stepping out of their safe zone. In the safe zone, you can't afford to connect with people or face your mistakes, right? But when you learn to calm triggers and re-regulate your emotions and your brain, you can take some risks and your life grows. Now remember, this is not just to feel better. You do have to feel better. You do need that. You deserve that. And what it gives you is an opening for the real healing to begin. And that's you becoming yourself and delivering the love and the contribution that you have to bring to the world. All right, number 5, stop trash talking the people who you choose to have in your life. It's very common for people who don't have CPTSD to just throw labels on people. This person's a narcissist, they're toxic, they're worthless. But if you really want to heal, if you want to double down on your healing, I encourage you to stop using those labels on people and instead just start noticing whatever you call it, the thing that other people do or have that is so troubling for you. The thing to focus on is not the other person, but the way that you get tense or you struggle around them. The way that your emotions rise up or you get dysregulated. That's the part. That's the part where you actually have influence over what happens next. You do have a right to make decisions about whether to let someone into your life or not. So now when you're triggered by someone, instead of just telling them, hey, you're a narcissist, and therefore, you should read this book I found about narcissists, because that always goes over well, right? No, it doesn't. Well, you can either accept them or you can step away from the relationship. The more you recover, the more you'll be at peace with the people you want in your life. And the more quickly you'll be willing to withdraw from people who you don't want in your life. Focusing on yourself is always going to be your superpower. When you can notice, oh, here we go, this is where I get triggered. Now, this doesn't mean that you should just learn to put up with terrible behavior in other people. You want to be aware, you want to be grounded, lucid, clear-headed, clear-eyed, and perceptive so that you can make good decisions about how to proceed when somebody begins to treat you badly. And if somebody's treating you really well, of course, you want to be at your best. So you want to be able to open your heart and enjoy that relationship when it's a good thing to do. Number 6, stop clinging to bad relationships that make you miserable. Now, I have to bring this in any discussion of what it means to double down on your healing. Staying in bad relationships and hemorrhaging all your energy and your cognition to a situation where you're fighting all the time, or you're being treated in an abusive manner, or you're being gravely disrespected, or you're sad all the time, this will halt your healing. Now, I understand there are relationships where there's an obligation or a duty, as there is with, dependent children or with certain other people who rely on you for care. And that may require extra effort and extra support to remove yourself from those situations that are destroying your happiness and your chances of healing trauma. But whether it's simple or complicated for you to get that distance, it's important to keep moving forward. All right, number 7, it's the same thing, but for jobs. Don't stay in jobs that make you miserable unless your life depends on it. There are times when we all have to do what we have to do to get a paycheck, but not forever. Don't let that be forever. And if the paycheck is not the problem right now, I want you to ask yourself, is being miserable at work something you are unconsciously choosing so that you can avoid facing something else that's hard for you right now? And I talk about this very directly because it's something that I've had to face in myself too. There was a lot of time when I was still at the effect of CPTSD where if I weren't miserable, I would have to notice immediately that there was this giant hole in my life where close relationships were supposed to be. And instead I had superficial relationships and I hated my job. And I was getting my self-esteem off the fact that I had this job, but I wasn't happy and I didn't like the way I was being treated. And I stayed 10 years working for an awful boss. But because I didn't have to stay in that job, I know the problem was in here. The problem was that I was accepting this unhappy lot in life in exchange for not having to make changes that felt impossible for me back then. And this was when I was a single mom, and I think I could have, I was probably scared to leave the security of that job, except that one day when the recession of 2008 got rolling, you know what, I didn't have a job anymore anyway. But honestly, I'm so glad everything fell through, because it was then that I started my first business, really, because, nobody else would hire me. I had to do something for money. I got my business off the ground, and that ended up being a really happy way to earn a living for many years until I transitioned to doing this, to becoming Crappy Childhood Fairy. And for those of you who have other extenuating circumstances that are keeping you stuck, feel the truth of what I'm saying. Let it guide you. Don't let yourself give up on your healing. Trying doesn't always lead to success, but success favors people who try. All right, number 8, detach from the belief that you passively, just magically, attract bad people. Now, I hear people say this all the time. I attract narcissists. Well, acknowledge that the issue is not really who is attracted to you. The issue is, who are you attracted to? Who do you tolerate? Who do you date? Who do you sleep with? That is the problem. And that's a much better problem to have than some sort of magic occurrence that flies out of the sky. Oh, look, a narcissist has just landed and attached themselves to me. It can't happen without your cooperation. It may seem like they just occur. Think of those signs in the park. It says ticks occur. Narcissists occur. But you do not have to let them into your life. Occasionally, exploitative people do look for vulnerable people and target them, but most of the problems in your life are more likely to be caused by a lack of boundaries on your part, a lack of a red flag detector, and being able to see, like, who should I let into my life? It's your red flag detector that needs to be switched into the on position, and that's part of trauma healing too. If you're going to double down on your healing, you're going to have to do that. You're going to have to take responsibility that you are the gatekeeper. And you may have heard me say, I attract mosquitoes, but, I don't marry them. Or sometimes I say, I don't sleep with them. I think that would be a good t-shirt. But see, attracting them is not really the problem. Number 9, if you have addictive behaviors, make recovery your first priority. Alcohol, drugs, food, pornography, spending, all that stuff. Your healing will get an enormous boost if you can take care of that. When you allow yourself to experience life's ups and downs and show up for it and not escape by some means, and I think we should include limerence in that, just checking out into fantasy, right? When you can stay in your life, then you can start to solve your problems. I know how tempting it is to try to grab on and control things or run away from them or just get into some kind of oblivion, some comfort. And it's almost universal with people with CPTSD, the urge to fly away or crawl into a hole. It's going to take one form or the other. It's going to visit you sometimes, but if you're using anything at all to sort of genuinely escape, like drugs, it's going to delay your ability to cope with feelings of disappointment and stress and emptiness and loneliness. Those are feelings that we actually need to have sometimes because they guide us into action. I totally know what it's like. But if you're using something to escape, it will make healing almost impossible. And even when you're perfectly healed, life is going to have its ups and downs, so there's always something to face. You're going to lose friends. Big disappointments will happen. Outside events will happen. You're going to need a means to be able to handle what comes. Whatever approach to healing that you choose for yourself, you're going to need an easy way to self-comfort and bring yourself back out of dysregulation and into re-regulation. And if you want to learn how to do it, I can teach you. That's all in the links in the description section below this video and all my videos, if that's something that interests you. When you always have a way to calm your reactions and comfort yourself, you'll find it's a lot easier to overcome addictions. That is true freedom, when you feel like, I don't know what's going to happen, but whatever it is, I'll be able to face it. All right, number 10, sit down and ask yourself, this is just a thought exercise, and I really like this one. Ask yourself, if I really had to solve this problem of having CPTSD, what are 10 things I could do? And I love doing this. You can apply it to any kind of problem. But it's a really good one to do about how you would heal from your trauma, because you actually have the answers. You have the answers in there. You just haven't tapped them yet. Or you may not have had the energy to focus on, taking action on them right now. So make a list of them, the 10 things that if you really had to solve this problem, in a short period of time, what would you do? You don't have to act on all of them at once. They can be preposterous, but write it. Just bring them into the sunlight of your awareness, the actions you could take if you really wanted to. Let them into your mind and heart and just see what happens.
Childhood PTSD is, in its essence, an injury to our ability to connect with other people. Abuse and neglect early in our lives literally change our brains, and neglect in particular can physically restrict the normal processes that enable us to identify good, appropriate people to bring into our lives and to gradually open ourselves up to them and develop close and trusting relationships. This, to me, is the most tragic part of childhood PTSD. To be capable of love, but not to be able to sustain a normal, loving relationship is a devastating price to pay for what happened. But the great news is we can totally make progress in this area if we are intentional about it. If we just kind of leave it to chance and hope we'll figure out love later in our lives, or maybe when the right person comes along, we're not likely to improve. And in fact, if you look around, the people you'll see a lot of older people who have actually deteriorated from being able to be close to others. If we don't work on this, we risk getting more and more cranky and isolated and hard on other people. And that's the tragedy. To me, the goal of life is to really learn to love other people. And it turns out that having and growing our connections with others is one of the most powerful ways we can heal our own PTSD. There's a large body of research emerging that shows that loving relationships actually help us heal our telomeres, the little caps on the strands of DNA that protect us from disease and slow down our aging. Love and connection are important for everyone, and especially for us who have so much catching up to do. Now, most people with PTSD have been hurt in this ability to connect, and if that's you too, then you're likely to struggle with relationships in proportion to the amount of time you spend in dysregulation. Dysregulation breaks connections. Re-regulation puts us in a place where we can begin to repair connections. As people whose ability to connect may be a bit wonky, we can definitely take steps to gradually heal this, and it doesn't always come naturally. Sometimes we have to be very intentional about it and work on it and take steps that are the opposite of the first impulse that comes to mind when we find ourselves struggling. Now, loneliness and feeling disconnection are universal experiences for everyone, at least a little bit, but for us, it can take over our lives. And this has everything to do with dysregulation, which makes connection very difficult, and re-regulation, which makes change in this part of ourselves possible. So we want to strike a balance, a healthy balance between solitude, which is the ability to tolerate and even enjoy our alone time, and connection with others. Because people with childhood PTSD tend to do a lot of things in extreme ways, and this is one of them. We isolate or live in deathly fear that people will leave us. We cling or we run away, and we might go one way with friends and the other way with significant others, but these extremes rob us of much of the good we're meant to have through our relationships with the people in our lives. Obviously, this is a huge topic, and I may make a whole course on it later this year, but for right now, here are some important things to remember in order, at the very least, to grow more regulated. So first, don't let yourself get too lonely. Every problem of your character will grow worse when you're in isolation. People who have cut everyone out of their lives seldom realize how weird they've become. Their rationale for avoiding everyone sounds plausible to them, but to the rest of us, it's just sad. It is a wish virtually everyone has when they know they're reaching the end of their lives. They'll say they wish they had given even more of their time and attention to loving relationships. So how can we grow closer to love in a realistic and gradual way that can be sustained? So not letting ourselves get too lonely is how we can grow closer to love in a realistic and gradual way that can be sustained. Loneliness taken to the extreme, and by that I mean We've convinced ourselves that we like the loneliness, and we found ways to numb out the nagging worry and sadness about it. This kind of loneliness and pretending corrupts us in the end. And when we're lonely in life, it should feel lonely. The feeling of loneliness is a gift that nudges us to reach out and connect, to keep on trying, to keep getting out of the house when it's tempting to hide out there. So another suggestion is to make yourself connect with people face to face every day. Get out of the house, leave your normal space, and find a way to walk down the street and interact with the world. Also, become a great listener. When you're with someone, you actually don't have to talk about yourself half the time or even at all. If you can learn to give your full attention to the person who's with you and to really listen to them without jumping in with your own story or debating the legitimacy of what they're saying or any digressions at all, the connection between the two of you will get stronger. I mean, right in that moment, you will begin to feel closer. And real closeness will soften any impulses you have to cling to the other person or escape from them or try to control who they are. Now, some people go to the opposite extreme and they pour their whole identity into another person as if this is an extension of themselves. Now, not living in the center of your being carries huge risks because your own strengths are not being revealed and your own problems are not being exposed, which would cause you and your circumstances to evolve. Some people cling to relationships or they get obsessed or promiscuous. And this is every bit as deadening for their souls as having no one. In fact, it's probably worse. Nothing can derail your life so dramatically as sexual relationships with people who don't care about you. For women in particular, sex bonds us to others, whether we love them or even like them. I know there are exceptions to this rule, but I would not really hold up sex with no strings as anything you would want to try in order to become happier or better regulated. Romantic and sexual drama can dysregulate you as surely as violence can. Other people may be able to have casual sex, but for those struggling to regulate, I don't recommend it. Trusting intimate relationships take time. So if you're hooking up with people or getting together with them in a rush or impulsively in the name of having fun, or just to fill your weekend nights until the right person comes along, you're in for a world of struggle. This topic is going to be my next course, and I have a lot to say about losing one's way along the path to love and finding it again. But some quick tips for now, while you're really working on your childhood PTSD, include: notice the relationship between dysregulation and relationship status. Are you more or less regulated when you're with someone? Generally speaking, a conflict-filled relationship will create more dysregulation than being alone, and a harmonious relationship will lead to less dysregulation. An unstable relationship where you're in fear about getting left all the time will lead to more dysregulation, and a secure relationship will lead to less dysregulation. So harmonious, secure relationships are a positive path forward and something to strive for. And the trick of that is, being in a high-drama, abusive, or unstable relationship does not work to bide our time until the right person comes. These negative relationships actually take us way off that path. The right person will never find us. Or if they do, our manner, our energy, the way we engage with others will be ragged from the days or years of difficulty we've had. So sometimes the shortest path to true love is found by being single for a while. So if you're single or whatever is going on in your love life and you experience a lot of loneliness, a very good and re-regulating thing you can do is to participate. Participate in your neighborhood, in your work life, in 12-step groups, in family get-togethers where you can be supportive of others. Practice love by being loving to others in little ways. If you're having trouble getting that started, here's a first step. Each day, find 2 people you can talk to in the line at the store or out on the sidewalk or on the phone, and contact them just to express something positive and supportive for them. Don't talk about yourself in this conversation. Just show up for the other person. I guarantee you, if you do this twice a day, things will shift, and you'll grow in your capacity to love, which can't help but lead to more connection, and in time, you'll find that that love is shining right back at you. After years of therapy, a lot of people affected by early trauma are disappointed that they don't feel better. They tried whatever the therapy was, it didn't work very well for them, and so they decide they must really, really be broken. Have you ever felt hopeless like that? So here's a different way to think about your healing. Try thinking of it not as something that a professional gives to you, but something that you learn to kind of harness from within. Maybe with professional guidance, or maybe on your own, you work to develop your own natural tendency to balance out your mind and your body and to bring it back from a dysregulated or stressed state back to a calm and regulated state. Now, there are dozens of ways that you can do this. If you watch my channel, you know I write my fears and resentments on paper and then follow it with a restful meditation twice a day. I've taught thousands of people how to do this, and if you want to learn it, I've put a link to a free online course that I've made down in the description section. So when people take that free class, they're invited to these free Zoom calls with me, and one thing that comes up a lot, a question that comes up, is whether it's enough to just write and meditate, whether that's going to actually change their mental state or help bring them back from dysregulation. So yeah, re-regulation is basically what my daily practice helps you do. And if you want to know what that feels like and whether it's going to be a fit for you, you could just try it. So another thing I get asked a lot is, shouldn't I also be making a gratitude list, or shouldn't I also be figuring out the original cause of my fears and resentments? And I always say, you can and should do whatever works for you. But just consider trying these twin techniques all by themselves just to see what happens if you don't put effort into anything else at the same time. Not overthinking it too much, not feeling like you have to improve on it. Just make a space for that natural healing tendency to just kind of well up from within. So we all have a natural healing tendency, and it might be kind of stressed and worn out right now, but with writing and meditation, you're giving it a rest and allowing it to get stronger in you. My observation from using the writing and meditation techniques all these years is that healing is natural. If I skin my knee, that wound will heal without me having to think about it or do it right. I don't have to plan it. I don't have to search for root causes to heal it. I don't have to write a gratitude list to make it happen. And if I get a cold, my immune system also will organize a fight, and pretty soon I'll recover. Now, in the same way, there's a natural tendency in us to heal from childhood PTSD. Without a doubt, this healing tendency can get blocked or disrupted by new trauma or exhaustion or drugs or drama or distraction. But when we get dysregulated, our brain wants to go back toward re-regulation. And so with simple healing techniques, we can kind of help that along. We can get out of the way so that the natural process can help bring us back to equilibrium. Now, everybody gets dysregulated sometimes, and most of us eventually re-regulate. Childhood PTSD makes us extra dysregulated and can make it harder to come back from that. And so the art of healing is learning how to notice the dysregulation and start taking steps to re-regulate just on the spot. If you notice you're feeling triggered, stop, use your techniques. If you're feeling numb or spaced out, take care of yourself and use your techniques to get back in your body and feel your feet on the ground. When you get good at noticing dysregulation and re-regulating quickly, you'll start to be able to make that inner correction almost spontaneously. 20 years ago, I would get dysregulated and I'd have to go hide in the bathroom at work to write my fears and resentments on paper. And today, more of the time, I can just make that inner shift and undo that kind of tightening reflex and relax into re-regulation. Now, some people call this self-regulation or self-soothing. And with practice, whatever you call it, it gets easier. And if the day comes that you do have access to professional help and you want to do that, you're going to have so much more of a base of strength to work with you and make that successful. If you have mastery over your inner triggers, you have a lot more freedom in the outer world. Whatever happens, you can handle it. And so confidence grows in you. And it's as if your world just got a whole lot bigger and a whole lot safer. Now, it pays to know the tools that work for you. For some people, it's exercise. For some people, it's sleep. For some people, it's martial arts or music or hanging out with their pets or reading spiritual literature. For me, it's writing and meditating. Now, you don't have to wait necessarily for a doctor or therapist to diagnose you and talk to you and figure things out. You can start doing the things that help you re-regulate right now. You can un-traumatize yourself. There is no harm in doing that. If you still have trouble believing that you can ever heal, I'll tell you the image that came to me in my own early recovery from childhood PTSD when I first learned this daily practice. Now, just casually while I was meditating one day, without meaning to daydream, I imagined myself as a blade of grass in a field just covered with wild grass. Now, grass is going to grow exactly like grass if you don't mess with it. If it's growing in a spot where there's some sunshine and a bit of water and some decent soil, not too many gophers tearing it up or cows walking all over it, it's going to grow into luscious, tall grass. Now, we've all seen dead grass. Maybe it got walked on too much, or it didn't get enough water, or it was stuck under a tarp for the summer, or the stalks are bent and dried out. It looks dead. And then it rains. And for a few weeks, nobody walks there. And what happens? It grows back into grass. It's the nature of grass to grow into tall green stalks of grass when conditions are good. And this is what I realized was true for me, for all of us. It's our nature to be calm and perceptive, to have equilibrium inside, and to have a nice, fresh, balanced, regulated nervous system. That's how we get green and luscious. And while grass doesn't have choices, we do. We get to seek help and get help. Medical help, psychological help, spiritual help. And help is good because it can augment the natural healing you're already doing. And again, if you need some help, I've shared things you can try in the description section below. When we step away from the source of trauma a little and calm the triggers, we can't help but become a little more ourselves. And that's the feeling we were missing back when we felt empty inside. Now we have a way to feel just right.
So you were born into abuse with a raging alcoholic father, didn't hurt you physically, but did hurt your mom while holding you. And I can only imagine what a trauma that would have been. Even if you can't remember it, it would definitely have gone in there about your sense of safety in the world and how much love there was to go around. So when you were 2, she ran away with you to the US, which I guess was another country. And I guess that would have been the end of your relationship with your dad. For your mom, I'm sure it was quite a trauma having to run away and go to a new country. So she would have been stressed. And then anytime that you did stuff she didn't like, if you were just acting up like a kid, she would call you, "You are your father's daughter, aren't you?" And that hurt. Yes, that is a huge insult. That's a projection by her of things that your father has done onto an innocent child. And anybody with a brain knows that, of course, the baby is not responsible for the father's behavior. So that is such a put down. And I know that for a lot of us who got told that, I also got told that a little bit at times, but it's like you become ashamed. You become ashamed of who you are and you're not even sure. I remember one person who wrote a letter to me some months ago, said she would look in the mirror and look for her father's features and go, "Oh, there they are, they're right about me." It's not cool, not a good thing to do. It's emotional abuse. You went through every kind of abuse that a person can go through, every kind you emphasize, and I guess I can read between the lines of what that is. But the damage is done, you say, and every time you think you've healed, you enter into another relationship that models the one you had with both parents. All right, that's what we do. Sounds like you're normal. I'm at the point where I'm just so exhausted. You either get neglected and abandoned, or manipulated, controlled, and put down, and just actively treated like shit. Okay. So those are the 2 variations that you've observed before, and you're about to tell me about a relationship that you feel is different. You can kind of see where I'm going here. Okay, here's the things you've tried. You've tried therapy. You've watched hours of videos on YouTube. Journal, meditate, sit with the feelings. Took a year off of dating. You've even taken a year off of dating to focus on yourself after ending a relationship. When you realized it was the same pattern of tolerating mistreatment and accepting crumbs. Had a few dates recently with people who seemed secure, but you didn't feel interested and they didn't seem interested and there was no second date. All right, so what I wanted to say about that, about things you've tried, Luna, is you don't say how old you are, but I'm guessing you're fairly young, maybe in your 20s, because the things you've tried, they don't sound like you've gone very deep yet. And that's really hopeful because that means that everything you listed could have gone a little deeper, like you've tried therapy. I don't know how much you did. I'm somebody who didn't benefit from therapy, but many people do. But I wouldn't expect the depth of trauma that you've been through. I that's just something, it's got so many layers. So I would really say if a person goes to therapy or tries journaling or meditation or anything, yes, you should expect to feel better, somewhat better. But then, changing the patterns and really kind of healing the deep-rooted stuff, especially when it happened before you can remember, that stuff, it's a process of healing that. So what I'm saying is it's totally okay that you're not all the way healed yet. The pattern is going to keep showing up until the wound is healed. And people say that as if like, oh, you bad person, you needed to go in there and heal the wound. Why haven't you yet? It's because it's mysterious, it's elusive. Many of us actually do get that healing, but it takes a lot of persistence sometimes. It takes practice. One part of your life will get a lot better, and then you'll go, oh, this other part of my life, I'm still struggling. That's the journey. Don't despair, because no matter what you're going through with healing and still suffering, all of it is leading to the sort of deepening and strengthening of you as a person. The whole process is good. Now that you're on the other side, you're out of the bad relationship. You are on the other side now, and everything here can be better. Everything can be better. So don't despair that things you've tried haven't worked. And sometimes it's the specific kind of therapy or technique that you use. I know it was for me. Like, I tried everything. I thought nothing worked. Then I learned the techniques that I teach that are called the daily practice. And boom, within like 2 weeks, I had a huge transformation. I had a transformation that changed my ability to stay regulated and sort of gave me the capacity to feel happy to be alive, which was huge, but it didn't immediately solve my problems with relationships. That took practice. And, what you get here on my channel is, decades of experience learning the hard way how not to do things and what does work. And I distill it down into videos and courses and coaching programs, hoping that someone like you can kind of cut through the clutter and through the rabbit holes that I went down that didn't work and go right to what does work. And what does work always includes an element of facing what is really happening, just facing what's really happening. You're doing a very good job of noticing, okay, the pattern is repeating. Step one, right? Why is it repeating? How does that pattern get back into your life? And that is usually getting in the portal for that bad thing to get back in and sort of twist your thinking and get you stuck in another bad situation. It comes when you're feeling magical thinking, when you're going into a fog of denial. I'm listing a number of things that, people with CPTSD do. Or we've had it so bad before that the littlest bit of niceness seems like a step up, and that might be the category that I put you in. I wanted to ask a question about an emotionally unavailable man I have an interest in. It's more like an obsession. So right there, I'm going to say, yes, it's more like an obsession. And this diagnosis of him as emotionally unavailable, I think that might be a misapplication of that. Now, he might be, he might not be. What he is, I'm just going to tell you right up front, he's shown no sign of being interested in you. You got one contact from him on social media, and it sounds like that's the only time he ever indicated an interest in talking to you. All right, so an emotionally unavailable person, usually that would be somebody who you're in a relationship with, and they try to be in the relationship, but they can't love you or they can't be present for you. But this is somebody who's just flat out unavailable. It's not just emotional. He's not there. He's not even in your life. You haven't had contact in 4 years. So this is a big clue that this is a limerent relationship, okay? And then you say he has a public image because he's wealthy. Well, so people who are wealthy probably get a lot more than the normal share of people who are interested in them. And that's something to ask yourself. And sometimes the reason, if he's artistic and wealthy, you're not giving information about him, and I appreciate that. We don't really know. But if he is well known and wealthy for his artistic abilities and he's very visible and known, then sometimes that is a super attractive quality and sometimes could set off limerence. And when people have that highly visible profile, it's easy to feel like we know them, even when they don't really know us. But I get that you were acquainted. So you knew each other through common friends, but never really got to know each other. There was no friendship. So big clue there. There is not even a friendship. You don't actually know each other. When you wanted to pursue a relationship with him, and you say, yeah, I know it's unhealthy to chase a guy, well, Chasing a guy, trying to get a friend to set you up with somebody, that's not inherently unhealthy. I think it might not be strategic, but it's, that's not the part that's limerent. You were hoping your friend would fix you up. The thing is here, he didn't bite. He didn't respond to that. So whether your friend did anything, he had his chance to be interested in you, and he wasn't. And I know that might be painful to hear, Elizabeth, but I just see no evidence that he is interested in you at all, or was when he had the chance to meet you. This happened some years ago, and I think you're saying it started like 12 years ago. It went on until 5 years ago. And you say you were very unhealthy back then. You had a string of toxic relationships. You had crippling anxiety and self-esteem issues. So yeah, sounds like you have CPTSD. It showed up in your relationships. And when we're in that state, when you're having horrible relationships that are making you miserable and you're having crippling anxiety and your self-esteem is bad, limerent relationships are just delicious. They look so good because you can kind of escape all of this. You can escape the plane where everything's a struggle and imagine this happy relationship where you get your emotional needs met. And I know you're going to be talking about your parents here. And I think that's a huge clue too, that your mom was totally self-centered, couldn't be there for you. Your dad was unavailable. So I see this again and again. I'm learning so much. And it's not like it was unknown to the world or to the people who are professionals in this field. But what happens when you're a kid, I just keep seeing this pattern of CPTSD where somebody wasn't even real to their parents and they become very vulnerable to relationships that aren't real. And if you know what I mean by real, like for parents to see the reality of their kid, they know who you are, they know how you feel, they care about it. They're down there on the floor with you working out problems and helping you understand yourself and loving you and helping you form self-esteem at the same time as having self-awareness to know when you're not sharing your toys. So it sounds like if your parents couldn't do that for you, there's a way that a person doesn't feel real. And I just keep seeing this over and over again. So we're going to talk about how you can become more real. So you were chasing him then, and he didn't seem interested. And I'm just going to say, since it didn't result in any kind of dating or anything, this is the tough love, Elizabeth. He wasn't interested. If a guy is interested in you, he will show up. He will let you know. He'll be present. He'll ask you out. So he wasn't interested. It wasn't just seem. But that's the limerence going, well, there's no evidence that he's interested, but I'm looking for signs. I'm feeling something. We have so much in common. Some people go into magical thinking. They think about in reality, he doesn't realize it yet, but we're, soulmates, or he doesn't realize it yet, but we had a past life together. There's a lot of ways that we trick ourselves into so that we can keep obsessing on somebody because it's giving us comfort in a horrible emptiness. And just like a drug, it can kind of get you off the hook in the moment, but it ends up leading to greater emptiness down the line. And that's what's happening here. You still haven't had the kind of relationship that made you happy. So let's assume that's the goal here and keep looking at what happened with this guy, Max, in light of that, of how we can help you move towards it. So then you said he coped with his issues using alcohol, and then he got sober, and your friend said so, but you're not sure that he did. Well, so that's interesting. You're obsessing on somebody who has alcoholism, and many of us have done that, but it's just a fact. Somebody who's an alcoholic is very unlikely to be a good partner. Somebody who has, you go on to say he has he has alcoholism, he has toxic relationships, he has issues. So it sounds like even if he were interested in you, the chances of having a great relationship with him are, he's not in that place. But there's the main problem, and that is that he's not interested enough to even stay in touch with you, okay? That's the main thing. So whether he drinks or not is not even your concern anymore. He's not in your life. So after a while, you stopped being interested in him and you found someone nice, but broke up soon after. Yeah, that's what we do. After the breakup, Max contacted you on social media and asked to talk over the phone. Okay, so there's the big moment you were waiting for, but you were not in a good mental space. You had had a breakup. There was a family death. You were feeling terrible, and you said, I can't talk to you right now, but will you talk to me later? And you thought he would, but he didn't. You haven't heard from him since then. That was 2017. So I would say if you've been kind of pursuing a guy for, what was that, 7 years, and he never took an interest, and then one day he calls you, he reaches out and says, oh, give me a call. But when you say you can't talk right then, or you need a little time and he doesn't call back, I would just say, I don't know what that call was, but it wasn't any big thing where he realized that you were the one for him. If he did feel that way, he would have called you back. Because again, if a person is interested in you, and I'm saying this to everybody, a man or a woman, they will let you know. If they're interested, they'll let you know, especially if it's safe to be interested. So the one case where people sometimes keep these things secret is if they don't think you like them. But if you've been pursuing them for years, they know, and they will let you know if they feel the same way. And he didn't. Okay? It's sad, but there it is. And this is good. It's really good. You know, sometimes just a clear fact is so helpful to set us free so that we can move on and actually have real love, right? So this is a good thing. This is how sometimes the news you fear is the happy news. Because you go, yay, you're free, you're free. You can stop obsessing on a ghost, right? All right, so then you said a couple years after that, you moved out of the country he lives in. You sent a goodbye message, he didn't reply. So there's your 100% confirmation, all right? He's not in your life. He's not in communication with you. He could be, but he chooses not to be, all right? So now you're back in your native country, and you came back to live with your mom because you wanted to give her a chance. And it's been a huge disappointment. You know, so you're in your late 30s, and so a couple years ago, you were still in your late 30s. So it's interesting to me that you would make a move for the sake of your mom at that time. But I don't know, that's probably another story. But I get the sense of you kind of traveling around the globe, trying to find the love that's going to help you get your needs met. I mean, your dad wasn't there at all, and she was narcissistic. So yeah, you probably hoped. I get it. Yeah, you wanted love. You wanted love, and that's always what it is. Everything bad I've ever done, everything dysfunctional I've ever did, I did because I needed love and I was lonely. So I think a lot of people can relate to that. So it's okay. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. You're showing a common pattern that people get from trauma. So you say, sometimes I think of Max and what could have been between us, and I'm not sure if this is healthy. I think that sometimes thinking of people from the past, there's no problem with that. But when you keep thinking what could have been, I think you have your answer about that. And that's the fantasy. It's just a temptation to go visit this fantasy where you are loved and everything's wonderful with this, you know, and artistically free. And you say you're artistic, and maybe you're just not telling me stuff here, but I'm not hearing anything in your life where that artistry is expressed. And I think that happens too around trauma, is that I believe you that you have artistic ability, but it's kind of hooked onto this other person. Like, if we could just be together, I could set free this gift I have for art. And that's really common, but it's not true. There is a such thing as people who create a life or an environment for you that allow you to set your gifts free, but they're never the ones who treat you like crap. They're never the ones who just don't even return your calls. That would not be it. So then you say, you remind me that he's 45, not married and with no kids. You're 39. So yes, those are marriageable ages. That would be ideal, except let's go back to the main fact. He chooses not to have any contact with you and doesn't know you. Okay. So yes, you said goodbye. He didn't reply. You don't know him well. But from experience you've had about men in general, he's not toxic or unsafe. So Elizabeth, I'm just going to say, I think you should handle that with tender hands, because I mean to say, hold it lightly. That in your past experience, you haven't had good judgment about who's toxic or unsafe. You've had a string of terrible relationships. And so if you're like the rest of us with CPTSD that isn't healed yet, it's just not something you're very good at detecting in advance. It's really common. You didn't do anything wrong. The way that you were raised inevitably almost results in that kind of broken red flag detector. But when you say, I don't know, from what you're saying, there's no evidence that he's not toxic or not or unsafe. And the drinking in particular, I mean, somebody with a problem with alcohol is inherently toxic and unsafe. Now, they might recover, but again, if somebody who you had a relationship with had alcoholism, and you were hoping that they would get sober, if they got sober, that would just be like the beginning of a very long road on the question of, are they a suitable person for you? When alcoholism is active, the answer is no. The answer is never yes with an active alcoholic. It's it's just a huge barrier to a real happy relationship or having your emotional needs met. That's why alcoholism is such a bummer for the person who has it and the person who tries to love the alcoholic. So it's a challenge. Sometimes people are already married to an alcoholic and they have children and they're invested, and there's all kinds of reasons to then, go to Al-Anon and learn how to live with the alcoholism and find peace, whether the alcoholic stops drinking or not, right? But if this person is not even your friend, I'm just saying, honey, no, don't pursue relationships with alcoholics. Now that we live in different countries and don't have any contact with each other on social media, I'm not sure if something's ever going to happen. No, there's no evidence that anything's going to happen, and even if it did, it would be random, out of the blue, from somebody you don't really know. So I'm going to strongly encourage you to set yourself free from any hope in this relationship so that you can have hope in real relationships. So then you say, my question is this: is what I feel for him limerence, which is obsession with the idea of a person, or healthy, mature love? And I'm just going to say, by definition, this is limerence, because what you're into is the idea of him. You don't even have a friendship with him. It's not possible to have healthy, mature love for somebody you don't know. That could be admiration, that could be attraction, that could be obsession, but it can't be healthy, mature love. Healthy, mature love is by definition a mutual thing between people who know each other, who care about each other, who are invested in the best for each other, who are present for each other. That's healthy, mature love. So let's go with limerence. You diagnosed it yourself. And then you say, is it worth saving myself up for him? Or should I just bite the bullet and admit to myself that this was a fantasy that I indulged in and I only got crumbs from it? There again, you see it, Elizabeth. I know you see it. It is the latter. It's a fantasy you indulged in and you only got crumbs from it. You barely even got crumbs. I mean, one contact. And then when you asked, is it worth saving myself for him? So there's this noble idea of saving yourself for someone, and saving yourself for someone who's actually committed to you is one thing, but saving yourself for a person you don't even really know or have a friendship with, I would say that's more in the category of avoidance. You're protecting yourself. You find it safer to be in the fantasy of future love versus all the difficulty and the slog of actual people love. And I can see why you feel that way, but if you want real love, the path to it is to come back down from the fantasy, back down to earth, back to the real men of the world who you meet, who right now you're judging as boring, but believe me, there are all kinds of men in the world. There are men who have everything that you listed about yourself in common. They have that in common with you too, and they're available for a relationship. And you have the opportunity, you're at an age where it's entirely easy to date men and learn if there is some kind of mutual feeling there that could grow into real mature love. Real mature love takes time to develop, and it's pretty hard to accomplish when you're still in so much pain and self-esteem difficulty and, just the crazy-making phenomenon of CPTSD. When you're in that, it's pretty hard to have healthy, mature love, because instead what there is what some people call attachment hunger, right? You're just like, I really want to be attached, can't deal with real men, but there's this guy I don't really know, and I just remember my idea of him, and it's so beautiful, and I want to be in that idea, but it's an idea. So back to earth, back to all of us boring earthlings here. We're not boring. We're actually quite wonderful, colorful, different, interesting, and the reason people seem boring is because right now you're kind of high on a fantasy. And just as somebody, let's say they were addicted to heroin, okay? If they were addicted to heroin and they were hanging around a bunch of people who were spending the holiday together and they weren't high on anything and they didn't drink, they would think that was boring too. In fact, alcoholics think people who aren't drunk are boring. So effectively, some people would call this a form of love addiction, and I'm just sort of going to put a question mark, like, is it an addiction? I don't know. It's an attachment wound. It's an attachment wound. It's certainly, it quacks like a duck. It acts like an addiction. This limerent idea, it's like an addiction. And when you're in your addictive behavior, Everything that's not that is going to feel boring. Nothing can seem to get in there. And that's part of what makes it so hard to be in a limerent state, is like you can't taste anything, you can't smell anything, metaphorically speaking, you can't feel anything. No one's getting through, you're not getting through. A huge part of yourself is kind of up in this fog here, where you're imagining the relationship that you might have and you're not experiencing the person who's right in front of you. And so it can be painful, it can be like withdrawal to come back down out of that cloud and just be on earth and start paying attention to people. And usually if the difficulty for you has been with men, then women friends are going to be good. If your mom has been difficult for you, a lot of people with difficult moms don't feel a lot of trust with women, or they don't feel affinity, and they find it easier to be friends with men. And so one thing you're always going to hear me recommend is to find groups such as 12-step programs, because often if you've been in an obsessive relationship, there's often financial catastrophe following that. If you can't be present on earth, well, earning a living is an earth thing. So unless you're independently wealthy, I'm guessing this is an area that's hard for you. So you can go to 12-step fellowships. They're free. There's group therapy. There's ways that you can be together with just women or men and women. But something where there's no possibility of romance, where you can just begin to practice connecting with other people and practice being real. Because that's what I wanted to address. The little bit you told me about your childhood, the narcissistic mom, the unavailable dad, how I see you as somebody, you're having trouble feeling the reality of yourself. You are a real flesh and blood woman. You crave love like all human beings. You want to be loved by a real person who can actually love you, not an idea. And you're just having trouble like connecting the reality of yourself to a real person. So you practice real relationships with people. And there's a way back. You practice telling the truth. You practice saying how you really feel, because part of being in a limerent relationship is always kind of pretending you're not as obsessed as you actually are in there. And so there's this way you're always sort of translating how you really feel into something you think is socially acceptable. One of the signs of limerence is that when you talk to your friends about this person you're so excited about, they're always like, they're acting like, oh gosh, we're sick of hearing about this guy, or they're worried about you when you talk about him. They're not quite on board with it. That's a sign. And obviously there would be exceptions, like some friends just can't get behind some love interest. But in this case, 7 years of pursuing a guy and he wasn't interested at all. I'm guessing your friends were sort of like getting a little tired of your quest, right? So pay attention to what people think and become yourself. Start telling the truth. Those friends in that other country, they're not around. Where you are right now, there are people in groups who you can get together with and you can just talk about this. You can say, I feel like I want to go on a date. What I'm worried about is this. Or you can say, I'm having memories about this guy. I would try to avoid social situations or groups where continuing to talk about or think about this guy, Max, is encouraged or tolerated. That sometimes is my unique perspective, and some people don't like it, but I'm telling you, if you want to get over anybody, whether they were actually in your life or that it's a limerent thing, stop talking about them. Number one, stop talking about them. Number two, make yourself stop thinking about them. When you catch yourself thinking about them, say, I gotta stop thinking about that. And give yourself a few go-to things that you can put your mind on. A nice piece of music, a cold drink of water, run up and down the stairs, or some happy memory, something that comforts you, where you can just push your mind instead. It's kind of hard to 100% control your mind, but go in this direction. Just take him off your mind. When they say that phrase, wash that man out of your hair, that's how you do it. You wash him out of your thinking. You wash him out of your thoughts. Thinking about him is you leaving your life. It's you going off. Because it's not just a fantasy, is it? It's kind of like the world of the dead. It's a world where there is no love and there is no interaction. And there is no contact. It's like the world of the dead. So come back, Elizabeth. Come back to the world of the living where we can love you and we can hear you. Okay? So one thing you said that I thought was important here, you said, I feel if I don't cut ties with him, I'll wait for that social media message from him for the rest of my life and will stay single forever. You don't even have ties with him to cut, but the ties that you have with him are mental with the idea of him. And that is, I would totally encourage you to cut those ties. It'll be sad at first, but you'll be surprised how quickly it feels better. It feels like clean. It feels peaceful to cut ties with an idea that's been torturing you. And that's what I'm hearing. You had said that it's safer to stay in the past because you know what to expect from it. I know how it will go. I just don't see anything safe about being alone for the rest of your life. That doesn't sound very safe at all. Change is unpredictable, and it does give you anxiety, and I totally understand it. The future is bumpy and bright. It's both wonderful and scary, and that's a fact. We're all going to get hurt again, here and there. But as you continue to recover and you keep yourself out of fantasy and here on earth, you can start to grow your open-hearted capacity to be solid with 2 feet on the ground and showing love. And that's the kind of person a healthy person can love. And I want you to have a healthy person to love, Elizabeth, and who will love you right back in the same measure.
I used to think self-care was just hot baths and chocolate for people whose problems were so small that they would actually solve them with chocolate. But 25 years of continuous healing and strength building has taught me that while it's true that self-care by itself probably won't heal childhood PTSD, it makes healing more possible, and it definitely makes it more sustainable. Now, how many times have you had some healing breakthrough from a book or a retreat or a new healing technique or a new boyfriend, and then within like 3 days, you're feeling more dysregulated and dysfunctional than ever? For me, so many times, because I made the mistake of thinking that the new thing du jour was going to be the whole fix for all time. Now, wouldn't that be nice if everything would just be okay forever, right? But that's not how healing works. Recovery from childhood PTSD doesn't happen because of one-time treatments. It happens because of multiple things that you use consistently over time. It's not a pill you take. It's more like a stack of pancakes. And here's what I mean. You probably know how important it is that you get adequate sleep, for example. And this would be true even if you'd never had any trauma at all. A lack of sleep not only wears us down physically, but degrades our cognition, weakens our ability to self-regulate emotionally, and amplifies virtually all the problems associated with early trauma, like depression, addiction, anxiety, and even heart disease and cancer. So if you get only a little sleep one night, and that's the only thing that's going wrong for you, you're probably going to be fine. But if you had a day where you had no exercise and you ate a bunch of bread and ice cream and no protein, and you watched 5 hours of TV and had 4 glasses of wine and had an argument with your partner, and then you lost a couple hours of sleep, then the lack of sleep could be the last pancake on your stack. And that's the thing on top of everything else that pushes you over the edge into being a mess, with yelling and dissociation and tears, and then 2 full days of brain fog and the clumsiness that goes with that, and all of that before you feel like yourself again. And it's hard to know what sets you off because whichever is the last pancake on the stack is different every time. The trigger is actually the full stack of pancakes, and that's what you want to pay attention to, because health problems can be a huge obstacle to healing. You know that vigorous exercise is one of the most powerful healing strategies available for PTSD, but you can't do it when you feel terrible from bad food and bad sleep or when you're sick. And I know this better than you might think. It becomes a vicious circle because if you're trying to do your life day after day under the burden of a fairly large bunch of health stressors, which I'm calling pancakes, the dysregulation you're feeling is probably also happening at the level of your nervous system. And you can't feel that necessarily, but it's making you sick. The increased rates of disease from childhood PTSD is well known and it's measurable. And the more trauma you had as a kid, the higher the probability that you'll bump into serious health problems as an adult. Not just the problems you'd expect to be risks for traumatized people like depression, addiction, anxiety, and behavioral things, but diabetes, obesity, heart disease, autoimmune disease, cancer, chronic pain, migraines, strokes. And please don't internalize this as your inevitable fate. It's not your fate. Your risk is higher, but not everyone is affected, and what you can do to lower your risk right now is heal from childhood PTSD. And this means mastering re-regulation, changing the things in your life that are beating you down, and taking beautiful, imperfect, but substantial care of yourself. Now, I get this in comments a lot. People say, oh, it's so easy for you to heal because you have no idea how bad it is for me, what I go through. Well, to those people, I say, Yes, I know. And if you think I haven't been at the bottom of the totem pole and stuck in hospitals and broke and sick and sad and hopeless, you just haven't heard enough of my story. Every person is different, but where you see me today is not where I always was, and where you are now doesn't have to be where you always stay. Everybody knows that crappy experiences in our childhood can end up causing a whole slew of symptoms in our adult life, stuff like depression, anxiety, relationship problems, health problems, difficulties with learning and paying attention and memory. One name for these symptoms is childhood PTSD. And if you think you have it, you've probably tried all kinds of treatments, from therapy and books and counseling and support groups and even medication. But if you're like most people I talk to, these normal people solutions are only kind of effective. They work for a while, so long as you're going to the class or until the insurance runs out. But after that, you're kind of on your own, worried, scared. You're going to slip back into all the symptoms of PTSD. That's what used to happen to me. I was trying to get my life together, and I was willing to follow all that good, smart advice from the people in my life. But it wasn't helping me. I would go to therapy 3 times a week, and when I came out, I would feel worse than when the hour started. I was worried about how I was going to get even the 2 or 3 days to the next appointment. But now I know that those solutions have this one big piece missing for people with childhood PTSD. There are things that you can do right now that totally work, but you have to understand what the real underlying problem is. Until recently, the effects on us as adults were thought to be almost entirely psychological. They thought we had developed negative self-esteem, negative beliefs about ourselves, maybe thought that we deserved to be in bad relationships, that kind of thing. Now, this may be partially true in some people, but it's not the whole story, not at all. So sure, childhood trauma can cause psychological problems, but the really important thing for us is that it can cause brain changes. So the effects are not just psychological, but neurological. And neurological problems can manifest in every part of our lives. It can result in physical health problems like diabetes and heart disease. But it can also manifest as emotional problems like depression or uncontrollable anger. Or it can manifest in behaviors that in theory we can control. Stuff like drug and alcohol abuse, risky sex, getting into abusive relationships, or the opposite, avoiding everyone. So these things start as neurological changes and then become psychological issues that then become self-destructive behaviors. So you can talk to a therapist about the behaviors or about the psychological issues, but if your brain is just sending compromised signals to other parts of your brain or to your organs, you have a problem that's really hard to talk your way out of. And that's not really how we were trained to think about it, right? You're supposed to talk about your problems, but when you have PTSD, talking about it can sometimes make it worse than if you weren't to talk about it. So if you're relating to this so far, then you're probably all too familiar with that feeling that you're kind of going down this path in life and you're getting really freaked out and you don't know how you got there and you don't know how you can dig your way out. So here's the missing piece. The underlying problem in childhood PTSD is dysregulation. First, we get dysregulated in the brain. Now you probably know the feeling really well. Maybe your emotions go up through the roof and then they go really flat and you say things you don't mean, or you get very spaced out and you do things like getting lost driving through your own neighborhood, or you walk into a room and you don't know why you came in there, or you lose your train of thought in the middle of trying to speak a sentence, or you get clumsy and you trip and you drop things. These are the telltale signs that your normally well-regulated brain has gone dysregulated. It's a little bit out of whack. If they did an MRI on you, they might see whole sections that have gone dark. There's no activity there. Or they'd see areas that are unusually lit up and not communicating well with the other parts of the brain that they're supposed to communicate smoothly with. After a while, our brains will gradually come back to a regulated state, but when you're suffering with childhood PTSD, you're spending way too much time in that dysregulated state, and it's really limiting. Dysregulated people can't think straight. They can't make good decisions. Their judgment is wrong. Research has shown that people who had a really rough childhood can sometimes have a lot of difficulty being aware when danger is at hand or a loss is about to happen, and they can't adjust their behavior accordingly. Do you ever feel like you just keep walking into the same problem over and over again and you didn't see it coming? It's really easy to spot in other people, but when you have childhood PTSD, it's sort of like you wake up and you go, how did I get here again? Now, psychological problems respond to talking and reason, but neurological problems have to be addressed a little differently. When I learned how to re-regulate my brain whenever I needed to, then I could start to rehabilitate every part of my life that had been damaged before. I started to feel the best parts of myself coming back online: my intelligence, my compassion, my ability to connect with people and to form lovely, nourishing, safe relationships. I could follow through on plans I made. I could be responsible. I could be healthy. I could be safe. I could be happy. If dysregulation is the underlying problem, then a purely psychological approach is only going to be able to get us a little temporary relief, which is not entirely a bad thing, but it's not going to get us a permanent change out of the suckiness of having PTSD. For lasting change, we need to get our brains working again, to re-regulate them. And with that done, then we can begin to re-regulate our emotions, taking them back from extremes of numbness and hyperintensity back to center. And from there, we can begin to re-regulate our decisions and our behaviors and take them back from the extremes that we're prone to with childhood PTSD of too much and too little.
Why do so few people make real progress recovering from the long-term effects of childhood trauma? If you ask me, it's because of the misguided belief that telling the story of what happened in the past, if we just probe the memories enough or generate enough emotions around those memories, that it'll somehow make everything better. This cultural belief in the story dominates the kind of help that any of us can get when we ask for help, and it dominates decisions about what health insurance will cover, and that dictates what you can get. Yet the evidence suggests that this hard focus on memories and feelings just doesn't heal trauma. I'm Anna Runkle, also known as the Crappy Childhood Fairy, and I want to show you a different way to approach healing from the long-term effects of abuse and neglect in childhood, one that is based more closely on science and recent research about the real nature of trauma. Now, compared to the memories and emotions approach, where you would get asked, tell me what happened in your childhood and what feelings come up for you around that. These are not irrelevant questions, but the approach I'm about to show you more accurately targets the real problem with childhood PTSD, or complex PTSD. That's what it's called when the trauma symptoms come from long-term ongoing exposure to intense stress, which is what happens for abused and neglected kids. And the approach that I'm going to show you points you more directly to the spots where you need healing and where healing is actually possible, right? You can't change what happened in the past, but you can work on healing your symptoms right now. And present time is a powerful place to be when you're healing. And as a survivor of early trauma myself, I can tell you firsthand how important it is to have tools in your hands all the time, tools to help you handle CPTSD symptoms right when they're happening, not just in weekly appointments, if you're even lucky enough to have those, but right now, on your sofa, in your car, on the bus, at work. We have to have a way to get relief from that intense distress when the old stuff is triggered. We are so vulnerable in those moments, and when we're triggered is when all the bad stuff happens. The emotional outbursts that hurt our relationships, the terrible choices, the loss of focus that has cost us money and time and progress in our careers. I mean, if you had a way to prevent the life catastrophes that have happened for you when your CPTSD symptoms were triggered, your life could be very, very different. Do you agree? So I'll come back to triggers in a moment. But any solution that's genuinely going to help you heal the trauma and turn around the damage that it's caused you in your relationships, your career, your family life, your mental and physical health, It has to both give you relief now, and it has to give you a way to make lasting changes so that a year from now or 10 years from now or even a month from now, you can look back and say, yeah, I'm happier and stronger and more free now to live the way that I want to live. Now, I'm not talking about external circumstances. I'm talking about internal limitations. The way that we avoid sticking our necks out to go for what we want. We latch onto sick relationships and then we don't leave. We spend years avoiding people and social situations that are hard for us just because it's too triggering. Now, if your CPTSD symptoms are going to pop up every time you try to expand your life, it really is safer to avoid life. So you can see how we got into this kind of scared, stuck, oh, what's the point place where we don't do what we want to do. We might be holding on to justifications for playing it small, like, oh, people are so awful, or the world never gives a chance to people like me. But the truth is that when we haven't learned to manage and heal our CPTSD symptoms, making our world small is pretty much our only defense against triggers that we can't control. Now, you're probably like me. You've tried, you've railed against the world. You've probably noticed that it's actually not really possible to make triggering events stop happening. Not forever. You leave one situation, then you get yourself into another one. The triggers are going to keep coming because that is the nature of life. That's how the world is. All you can really change is your triggered reaction, your response. And when you no longer get triggered by certain things that flood you with adrenaline and emotion and throw you onto shaky ground, when you no longer get triggered by it, it's not a trigger anymore. That's how you get free. Whether you tell the story of your past trauma 3 times or 1,000 times, it's your triggered reaction to events that are beyond your control that will block your healing every time. So how do you diffuse the triggers? I'm going to tell you how I've done it for myself and what I teach my students. Obviously, people are different and there are many approaches, but I've tried to keep it really simple and doable and have therefore narrowed it down to just 3 aspects of complex PTSD. These aspects are where I believe the trouble all is concentrated. They're the primary manifestations of our adult symptoms, and likewise, they're the big areas of opportunity for healing. It's where you can focus. And the 3 things are: 1, dysregulation of the brain, nervous system, and emotions. 2, difficulty forming and handling relationships with other people. And 3, a tendency to fall into self-defeating behaviors. So dysregulation, disconnection, and self-defeating behaviors. I call these the trauma trifecta. It's kind of a goofy term, but it works to describe the 3 sources of virtually all of our CPTSD-related problems: dysregulation, disconnection, and self-defeating behaviors. These 3 affect every level of our being: our thoughts, our emotions, our work, our relationships, our neurology, our physiology, basically everything. Now, we know scientifically that all these parts of life are directly impacted by past trauma. But what's causing that? What's causing the symptoms right now? It's not the past directly anymore. It's our ingrained reaction to day-to-day life right now. And this is good news because it's pretty hard to change the world when you're focusing all your healing on other people and the past. Those are 2 things you cannot change. You might learn more or make discoveries about why you are the way you are, but healing is rarely cognitive. It's not all about knowing. I wish it were. A lot more people would be healed. We know a lot. Healing might involve knowing, but mostly it's about changing, taking action, practicing, strengthening your ability to re-regulate yourself, to form good relationships with other people, and to set boundaries, and to just stop sabotaging yourself with destructive choices. They cause waste and tragedy in your life. They set you back from everything you're trying to do. The focus has to shift from what other people did to what we are doing that re-traumatizes us, and what we're not doing that needs to be done if we're going to become our real selves and live life for real. It's easier said than done, I know, but that's how we heal. It's totally possible. That's why I'm saying recovering old memories and feeling your feelings, it's nice, it's part of the journey, but it isn't going to be enough. What we need is more concrete and present time solutions than that. What we need is a way to get emotional relief right away when we're triggered. We need a way to neutralize triggers so we're not held hostage by people and circumstances we can't control just because they set us off. And we need to honestly face the life problems that have piled up in our lives. That's what happens when you have CPTSD. You get life problems, and there's no way out but through. These three things, dysregulation, disconnection, and self-defeating behavior, have a way of flowing into each other. One causes the other, and that in turn makes the other thing worse. And what they all have in common, and this is important because this is where we have, an opportunity to break that cycle. What they have in common is that they're all activated by triggers. If you don't get triggered, these tendencies may not even show up from day to day. When you're calm and you don't dysregulate, and that in turn makes it easier to connect to people, and feeling connected calms the tendency towards self-defeating behavior, and that leaves you calmer and more regulated, well, that is how the path to healing unfolds. One step after another, they flow. So for right now, where do you start? Where can you break that cycle? Where can you strike a crack into it and change the dynamic? The answer is absolutely anywhere in the circle. You can start anywhere you find the opportunity. You can learn to re-regulate. I have a free course to get you started on that, the daily practice. I'll link that in the description section too. You can change a self-defeating behavior. Maybe start with something easy to change, or you can practice being more present with people who are in your life right now and consciously develop your capacity to feel connected. Any one of these little things you do will have a ripple effect and make it easier to do the next thing, which can be anywhere else in the circle. You don't have to push so hard that you freak out and give up. Don't do that. Just take small steps every day. There is no more powerful strategy for integrating real change in your life over time than small steps taken consistently. You'll hear me say that over and over again. What doesn't work is just avoiding the whole thing and trying to get to the end of your life without more trouble. All right? You've probably already spent some time doing that, and that's sad. What doesn't work is raging or venting or demanding that people apologize or change so that you don't have to feel your triggers. Nobody could blame us for wanting that, but I'm telling you, it doesn't fix CPTSD, and it doesn't work to blame other people for giving you the wrong kind of help. You're always going to need your own tools. The solution is to get more regulated, more connected, and more committed to supporting yourself. You're a good soul, no matter what you struggle with. I want to show you the big picture, what I've noticed from my own life and from teaching and coaching thousands of people who suffer with PTSD symptoms from childhood. And what I've noticed is that healing tends to flow through 5 crucial phases. Okay? So, the first phase of healing is to realize what trauma is actually doing to you. Obviously, everybody's different, but the effects of abuse and neglect in childhood tend to follow very common patterns. They're so common that I think you'll find it comforting to find out that no, a lot of your challenges and mistakes are not, as you may have thought, some kind of personal failure. When you learn the common effects of trauma, this is something I teach in all my courses, you're going to find out how many of your problems are normal. You can totally let go of all the blame on yourself. You don't have some kind of crazy preference for drama. You're not seeking out people who hurt you. You're not trying to recreate your childhood. Have you ever been told these things? The common symptoms of CPTSD from childhood are normal responses to abnormal circumstances during your developmental years. Yes, there are psychological elements. Yes, we sometimes sabotage ourselves, but at its root, CPTSD is a neurological injury that disrupts brain and body systems, and this affects your health. It can cause chronic disease, it can cause learning problems, relationship problems, financial problems, depression, anxiety, addiction, and this is a big one that gets overlooked. It can make it impossible to make clear-headed decisions right when you need to make a clear-headed decision. There's a lot of wrong information out there. You see it on TV and movies a lot. A traumatized person finally just talks about it and everything magically gets better. If only it were that easy, right? Of course, it looks from the outside like we just aren't seeing that we're traumatized. We're not admitting what's actually at the root of our problems. It looks like that because our actions don't make sense. We probably seem deluded, and it makes no sense that we would keep making the same self-sabotaging mistake over and over. So to someone who doesn't have CPTSD, it's easy to assume this is some kind of decision we're making or a choice. And if someone believes that, they can dress it up with all kinds of reasoning about why that would be. But the telltale sign that an idea or an assessment isn't really the right one in your case is that applying it doesn't do anything for you. Results matter. There might be a tiny puff of belief when you first hear an explanation for your symptoms. Oh, you just want things to be bad. But if you give it a few days and it still doesn't work, well, there it is. Knowing some idea of what's wrong with you is not a solution. If it doesn't lead to you healing, it might work for other people, but if it doesn't work for you, it's an idea, not a solution. And if your failure to respond to common treatments is making you feel ashamed, like there's something wrong with you, then internalizing this, it's just a misunderstanding. It's wrong information. This should come as a relief. We now have a much better understanding of what trauma actually does to people. You're not a bad person. You're normal. Your symptoms are not your fault. Knowing this is the first crucial phase of healing. The second phase of healing is to understand the root cause of your symptoms. For most people, this is dysregulation. Chronic stress and trauma in childhood can cause brain and nervous system changes that affect every system of the body. Those normally regulated systems become dysregulated. And you'll hear me use that word all the time, dysregulated. There's emotional dysregulation and there's neurological dysregulation, including dysregulation of brain activity from like a flowing pattern to a chaotic pattern. And this in turn leads to dysregulation of hormones and chemical signals that govern your immune system, your heart function, your reproductive system, your metabolism, your attention span, your ability to stay calm and present and not melt down emotionally, or your tendency to totally space out at crucial moments. And in this stage of healing, you learn to notice when dysregulation is happening. What are the signs that you have it? What triggers seem to set it off? This sets off a huge wave of growth for the people that I work with, just like it did for me. They'll often say, oh my God, that's what I have. No one's ever described this before. And it's the dysregulation that throws me off every time. Now, if you have that, that's what's made it almost impossible to stop making those same mistakes. It's made it impossible to solve problems in your life that seem to just hang around or get worse, even though you do everything right. It's the dysregulation, and guess what? You can learn to re-regulate. You can learn to do that. It's strange at first, and it'll surprise the heck out of you to find that simple techniques can stop a trigger from turning into an upset and then a full day or 3 days of dysregulation. You might still get dysregulated sometimes, but you'll notice it sooner, and you'll be able to turn it around quickly and get back to being okay and doing what you're doing, focusing, being calm. When you're regulated, you're a lot less likely to lose your temper or have an anxiety attack or feel overwhelmed or overeat. You have a way out of all that. And when you're free, so many things in life become possible. I love teaching people about this in my coaching programs because it's one thing to read about how to re-regulate or watch a video about it, but being in a small group, connecting every week with people who know you and sharing what you're trying, what you're noticing, having people hear you and be happy for you, and sharing their discoveries about what works. I get to see this light go on in everyone's eyes, like, oh, that's it. We're not failures. We're not stupid. We're dysregulated. And this can be healed. And we watch each other do it. You can see this transformation in people. And so that is the third crucial phase of healing, learning to connect with other people. This is probably the single harshest impact of childhood trauma on your adult life. Feeling like an outsider, feeling like you didn't get the memo on how to act, or you're good at acting like you're fine, but you never feel like you're safe to be yourself. You feel lonely, even in a crowd. And of course, romantic relationships can be dreadful for us. We can get obsessive. We could end up having no relationships. It's not supposed to be this way. And I say it again and again, childhood PTSD is an injury to our ability to connect with other people. It's an injury, but this capacity to connect can be learned. When you're more regulated, it's easier to connect, and it works the other way. More connection, handled slowly and consciously, can help you get more regulated. So healing is kind of an upward spiral. It's not a straight line. And sometimes it goes fast and then slow and fast and slow, but you can keep progressing if you stick with it. The fourth crucial phase of healing is all about facing your own self-defeating behaviors. Do you ruin relationships with anger? Are you isolating? Do you have addictions or a problem with food and weight that's hurting your health? Do you feel stuck in an abusive relationship? These are all trauma related, and a lot of traumatized people stay stuck with these problems all their lives. When you're re-regulated and connected a little more, you can begin to change these. That is sacred and honorable work, to keep facing your own mistakes. Don't be shy of it. It feels good, making day-to-day changes in a positive direction. This is where life starts to get much more open, much more happy, and then comes the fifth crucial phase of healing, and that's when you're able to shed your old, limited idea of yourself, stuck in resentment or hopelessness or paralysis or trying to please people who are never going to be pleased with anything you do anyway. This is the phase where you're able to discover who you really are, the real you, and the gifts that you were meant to bring into the world. This is the phase of joy and sharing and healing with others. What I'm seeing as I hear from all the people in the channel, in my online community who engage with my content about patterns that are helpful and patterns that really just make people who want to heal feel miserable. Okay, so I notice two basic self-concepts out there. The first is what I notice in people who are working hard to figure out the problem caused by their experiences and to find the solutions that seem to help them get better. Now, not everything they've tried may have been helpful, but they're active in this project and noticing where they get lifted up and where they fall short. And when they comment, they'll tell you these little nuggets of wisdom. They'll say, you know, I tried X, I did Y, I did Z, and X was horrible. Y was okay, but Z was amazing, and that's what really helped me. And there are clear signs that someone is healing too, that they get along better with people, they feel more at ease in groups or when they're alone, and their talents and gifts start emerging and filling up their lives with purpose and hopefulness and a helpfulness for other people as well. And they'll begin to tell you that. So for this first group, they're subscribing to my channel because, and this is what they tell me, it's practical, it's solution-oriented, and it's based on not just theory, but real experience that they can relate to. They feel seen, they feel not alone anymore. I love that. I feel that way too. And for people who are having a breakthrough in their healing like this, it is so exciting to try out new tools, new ideas, and see if there's something in there that they can use. They want inspiration. They want to hear how other people heal. They want action steps. They're ready to go. Now, you can tell I'm very fond of this group, right? I also love the second group, but these are the folks where the breakthrough hasn't happened yet. They're good people. They've worked really hard on their healing, and a lot of them are knowledgeable about the treatments out there, and they've tried a lot of them, but the healing hasn't come yet. And so this group is really, really discouraged, and they come to feel helpless and hopeless, and you can see it in the comments they write. Now, deep down inside, they've stopped believing that healing is possible for them. And all that leaves them, and you see it in their comments, is bitterness. So people who are going through this will have a lot to say about things outside of themselves, family members, exes, society, the people who said they would help them but couldn't or wouldn't, anybody who made them feel unimportant and unseen and unloved. And that's all real, and I know it hurt them. People in this state of discouragement can tell you very clearly what's wrong with all this, what ought to change, and what their pain is like. They're very, very in touch with their pain. And most of us have been there. That's part of it, right? For all of us. But this second group, this discouraged and stuck group, what's also clear is that they have a very vague or non-existent concept of themselves, of what they would be like without that emotional pain. The pain becomes everything, as if it's who they are. And so they can't see themselves in a different future state where things have changed for the better. They can't even imagine it, what they might be like, what day-to-day life would feel like if they weren't trapped inside their own symptoms. So that's what I mean by stuck. Now, getting stuck in pain and isolation is a very traumatized thing to do. It happens to everybody sometimes. But if you want to break out of that, you have to do what I call breaking the wheel. And what I mean by the wheel is the churning, negative thinking and emotion states that go round and round with us. The blame, the obsession with people who hurt you, the struggles, the failures, the ways that you were never accepted or seen, and the stories that you told yourself over and over about why you are the way you are. And it's not that these stories are not true necessarily, but if we can't stop the spinning, the wheel just gets stronger and faster. And it's like a centrifuge, right? Something spinning that throws off and scatters everything that comes near it. It throws off people who love us. It throws off wonderful opportunities. It throws off financial security and joy, right? All gone. And the wheel is very seductive at the same time, and that's why I use this metaphor. You can't just slow the wheel down. You don't ask it a lot of questions or analyze the trajectory of everything that's flying around the room. You just have to take a big metaphorical stick and shove it in there and break that wheel. And don't worry, the wheel's made of air, and when you break it, the whole thing evaporates. It's not going to hit you in the face with fragments or anything. It just evaporates. It's gone. It's like waking up from a bad dream. You thought the wheel got the better of you, but it didn't. And you thought it protected you, but it actually just kept you stuck in pain and made you see nothing but helplessness. But you know what? You're not helpless. There's a whole wide world of experiences out there if you can get a little breathing room just to get started from that cycle of fear and anger and analysis and diagnosis and blame and then fear again. Thinking and talking about this stuff doesn't make it go away. It goes away, and remember, all you need is just a little bit of breathing room. It goes away when just for a moment you can just release the story. Open yourself up to a fresh and new experience of yourself and your capabilities in present time. The focus needs to come off of time past and other people and onto the only thing you can heal, which is yourself. And the knowledge that right here, right now, through practical steps, you open the door to that healing process by changing your mental state. Not helpless, hopeful. And for there to be hope, you need to have a vision, an ideal. You need to have a belief that healing is possible inside your own healing, whether or not other people change, whether or not circumstances change. This is the crucial sign that someone is on a good path. They recognize their own agency. Do you know that term? They begin to see choices that they can make, even when CPTSD puts nothing but hard choices in front of them. You always have a choice, and despite the symptoms you have today, you can move one foot in front of the other toward the healed life that you deserve. Now, you can choose to learn a new way to respond to the inevitable stressors and hardships of life. They will never stop. Life's going to keep throwing this stuff at you, but you can change. It starts in here. It starts in the way that you regard the possibility of your own healing. Can you see it? Do you believe it's possible that things could be better and easier in the future than they are right now? And are you willing to make some changes, starting with the way you talk to yourself about your trauma? Because if you're telling yourself that you're hopelessly screwed up, then whether you mean to or not, you're disconnecting with your life and all the people in it. People generally have a lot of compassion, but when they sense that negative wheel is spinning, it's like a hum. You can feel it in other people, right? And it makes you want to pull away. So it ends up isolating you when you go there. The very thing you're longing for isn't happening for you when that wheel is spinning. And you're like, why can I not get some support? Why doesn't anyone believe in me? Can't they see that I need some help? And that is a really hard place to be. And worst of all, that spinning wheel of negative ideas about yourself blinds you to who you really are, to all the good things that you're capable of bringing to this world. Your life is real. Your life is important. So how do you even begin? And this is one of the reasons childhood PTSD is so hard, is because it can make even little steps just seem overwhelming. And God forbid, there's a whole list of things that you need to do and you know it. It can be paralyzing. But if today you can just do one thing, I'll keep it really simple for you. Just get it into your mind, what it will feel like when your PTSD reactions to life are reduced. You want to give it a try? Let's take a minute and I'll walk you through it. Imagine you're in a stressful situation. You're making a mistake at work, or visiting your family, or getting your feelings hurt by a friend who lets you down. Pick something that's both hard for you, but also that's likely to happen at some point in your future. It's realistic. Now, remember what it's like when your CPTSD triggers start firing up and that wheel starts to spin. Here it goes. And you start getting dysregulated and you start reacting in the old ways you hate. You feel tight, your heart races, you want to lash out, maybe you start getting numb, and you get scared that that same old part of you that always comes out when you're triggered is going to happen one more time, okay? Now, let that go. Now, imagine you're in that situation, the bad thing happens, but now your PTSD symptoms are 50% less. You feel a little rise when you're triggered, but it doesn't go over the top. You don't lose control. You still have choices about the words you say, your facial expression, the harsh thoughts that are going through your head. You can see them, but you can decide not to say anything in the moment. Would a 50% reduction in symptoms change how that all turned out? Okay, probably, right? Same situation, but this time let's take the symptoms down a little more to say 20% of what you're used to. What would that be like? The bad thing happens, you feel it, it hurts, but it doesn't carry you away. Would you be able to express yourself better? Would you be able to stay present and keep your choices? Could the relationship that in the past would have blown up in your face instead survive without damage, even though something hurt your feelings? Would it make a difference in your life if you could do that long term whenever stressful situations come up, right? Would strength in this area allow you to change some of your circumstances? Would it be easier then to make friends with people who fit you a little better than the ones you have right now in your life? And if that were all going well, could you imagine other things going well? Your relationship with a partner, your career, your physical health, your ability to share your gifts with the world. Well, now you just joined the ranks of the first group I mentioned. That's how you do it. The ones who can see, imagine a better future, and the ones who are more likely than anybody else to actually make it there. It starts by allowing yourself to believe that you're capable of changing your life.